Hello and welcome to this interview series from the Feminist Library. My name is Sarah and I'll be your host today. The Feminist Library is a large collection of women's liberation movement literature based in London. We have an inclusive, intersectional feminism ethos, and the library is run by a team of dedicated and enthusiastic volunteers. We're currently in the process of making some fantastic content for you all, so please make sure to like our videos and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Today, I'm really excited to be able to introduce you to Jael de la Luz. Jael is an intersectional feminist, an editor, historian, booktuber, and columnist for Praxis, an online magazine written in Spanish. She's also the community engagement officer at Latin American Women's Aid. LAWA is an organisation that runs the only refuges in the UK that are run by and for Latin American women and children survivors of gender-based violence. In addition, Jael is part of the London Latinces and is a volunteer at the Feminist Library, where she leads the Spanish Literature Book Club. She has also contributed writing to Callaghan, a media publication that is committed to telling the stories of people of colour from marginalised genders. You can access her work on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, so please do follow up after watching this. Jael, welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time to record this interview with us.
Thank you to you for have this time with me. I am very, very happy to take part in this series, especially because it's necessary to listen other voices, especially for migrant women and women of color in this time, because we are basically living in very, very difficult names. So for this reason, we need to open our space for share our own narratives and as well have this exchange and solidarity from the feminist point of view.
I'd like to begin by asking you if you could please tell us a bit about your background and your life experiences and the identities you claim.
First, I am from Mexico. I call myself a mestiza, women of color, but my idea to be a mestiza come from Gloria Anzaldúa, and her approach basically is an intersectional approach. When she say the new mestizas, they are bridge between culture, language, backgrounds, and the new mestizas don't feel fair to navigate between cultures. For me, it's so important to reclaim this concept to be a new mestiza, la nueva mestiza, in this context, like migrant women, like women of color, like grassroots activists. And as well, I was part in a Pentecostal church in Mexico, and part of my spiritual and resistance and resilient genealogies come from other women that they take part in the church. And in one moment, I feel don't continue to be part of this community because, you know, when you are more awareness about the violence, for me, in a moment, this space, the religious space, was very violent for me. But part of my background is come from these dissidents spiritualities. I am mother of 3 children. Two of them, they are men, and one of them is a woman. But she is a teenage, and in this moment, she is questioning the gender. So I feel very happy for this opportunity I have to share with my children. I am a bisexual woman as well, so I am very proud as well to feel more free in this country, because in my country, you know, for all these cultural stereotypes about to be a Mexican, a Latin woman, sometimes you need to be according to the normal situation. And for me, was a moment to be in silence about my gender, about my sexual orientation. But in this country, I feel more happy to reclaim as well my bisexuality and feel proud of to be part of the LGBTQ queer community in this country. I call myself a new mestiza, migrant women of color, anti-imperialist, intersectional, decolonial feminist.
I mean, I'm hearing lots of things here that sound like they actually are the things that draw you towards feminism, right? To do with sort of stereotypes in the LGBTQ community. Can you tell us a little bit more about what draws you to feminism, or when in your life you felt you turned towards it?
I know about the feminists when I went to the university, and in the first time in Mexico, when I was a student in the university, like 20 years ago, we call gender studies, but we don't call just feminist, because in this moment the word was very, very strong. The majority of my college and lectures say, oh, we need to study this from a gender perspective. But for me, little by little, for my own conditions, economical and cultural conditions, I was very aware about the role that class, gender, and capacity have, especially because I come from a very poor background. My mother and the majority of the women in my family, in both sides, they don't went to the university, and they were basically peasants or peoples from indigenous and Afro descendants background. I was part of the first generations in my family to go to the university. But when I went, basically because I was studying history and author, human and arts science, they were just for middle and upper classes. And for me, it was very, very difficult to fight against these conditions. For this reason, always I try to demonstrate myself. I have the power to communicate my ideas correctly and eloquently with a good Spanish, and I put a lot of effort to write in a proper ways, in the academic way. So I try to reeducate myself to be accepted in this academic world. But when I saw myself in a mirror, I was very, very aware about what I looked physically, and I was not a white Latina. I am not a white Mexican. And as well, for my poor background, sometimes I lived discrimination. And as well, for my religious background, I lived discrimination because in the majority of the countries in Latin America, if you are a Pentecostal, the people have stereotypes about the Pentecostals because the people believe the Pentecostal people is poor and not educated people. So for me, it was very, very difficult to fight against all these stereotypes. In the end of my journey, I had a very, very good achievements. So I am very, very proud to finish a degree and a master in history because everything was against myself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fantastic achievement. And what really struck me as you were talking there is that you were talking about that emphasis on demonstrating, right? Trying to claim that space in an academic world that felt like it wasn't quite the space for you, right? I find that quite interesting because often academic feminism, for instance, feels or can feel quite removed from everyday life. And it got me thinking about that term that you have, feminopraxis. And I wonder, is that related at all? Is feminopraxis something, that's more demonstrative, that is something practical and everyday?
Definitely. I think I am living in United Kingdom 6 years ago. When I come from Mexico to United Kingdom, I didn't speak English. But my only way to continue linking with me, with my friends and other people was through my writings. For this reason, I have the opportunity with other 3 friends to create together an online magazine, and we call this space Feminopraxis. Basically, the idea about Feminopraxis is, in Spanish, feminismo en acción, feminist in action. The majority in Mexico and Latin America, the majority of the feminists now, I am very happy. We have more demonstrations, and the new generations of feminists in Latin America, they are practically, they come from grassroots movements, and we have a lot of movements. But 6 years ago, the majority of the knowledge about the feminist practices were in the academy, in the NGOs or associations, organizations. My friends and me, we were thinking about the opportunity to open a space for other women, normal feminists, to have the opportunity to write, and they want to share their practices, their ideas, and their art through online space. For this reason, we open this space like a collaborative space. And we are very, very proud because basically we have 5 years in the cyberspace. So we are as well as cyber feminists.
Yeah. Yeah, which leads perfectly onto my next question. And I was wondering a bit about what MimikouHost is in a bigger sense, because of course it's online, it has its website, it has the Instagram account. How important is that online presence, do you think, to MimikouHost?
It's very important. On one hand, it's very important, especially because when you are a migrant woman, you have this desire or this necessity to share in your own language, in your own background, what is happening with all the challenge and change you are living in a new country, in a new culture, in a new language. So for me, like Jael, Feminist was or is a very important space because I can think in my own language and I feel like this is a safe space for me, especially when you are a migrant woman and you are living in the diaspora. Sometimes you need to exchange the information with the other feminists, not just in your motherland, as well around the world, because the feminism is a global movement, and sometimes the struggles, they are in similarity, but sometimes we don't know what happened with other Mexicans or Latins feminists, for example, in France, in Holland, on India, in other places, because they don't have the space to share what is happening with them. For me, like a migrant women and women in the diaspora way, was so important or is so important to write in feminist practice, just to share my experience. And it's important as well because some people in Latin America and in Mexico believes that my life is better here than if I will continue living in Mexico. And in some ways it is, but in others no. So when you open the narrative and you share all the challenge and as well all your sorrows and your joys, the people, have other imagination, other idea about what is to be a migrant woman in the first world or in a country like United Kingdom. Everything is not easy for me, and I think this is so important because when I share my experience through feminist praxis, other migrant women feel encouraged to write and send us their writings, and we share them. And I say, it's so important to open the space for migrant women in the diasporic way. In other hand, I think it's so important a space like this because sometimes the women have different ways to demonstrate their compromise to be a feminist. Some of them, they are more intellectual, others, they are more grassroots activists, others, they are just artists, or others create in different formats. So the idea to create feminist praxis is open the space to all the voices, and as well we have some commitments. The first thing is to be intersectional, to be a trans inclusive, to be anti-racist. I am so happy that we have this space, the cyberspace, we can share a global point of views.
Feminist praxis is doing so many different things, isn't it? It's providing that sort of practical space to have that feminist community in your own mother tongue, creating community, preserving identity, space for sharing that truth about experiences. And I think that real strength is that point you just sort of touched on, is actually that it allows people to showcase all those different ways of being a feminist as well, right? Because it's something that could feel, potentially exclusionary if you think feminism or being a feminist has to look a certain way. Something I'm curious about is whether its digital presence actually shapes the kind of community it creates. The fact that it's all online, do you think it works differently to say how an in-person community would work?
In my own experience, it's not the same when you are behind a screen, because in my culture, the Latin American culture is very touchable culture. You need a physical contact, and sometimes it's not the same when you are talking about different issues or try to agree in a campaigning or some situations, because sometimes the time is against us, no? We are in different times. But in other hand, I think if we use strategically the online space, you can create amazing things. For example, in the international solidarity, one of the big challenge we have is the sustainability. For the moment, our space is basically collaborative. The four of us in the team, every year, we need to donate and together make possible money to pay service for the blog, the account in Zoom, and other kind of this technical stuff. And the majority of the work is free. We put our time or our desire free, but sometimes I understand, and this is the big challenge for the majority of the community feminist space, is the sustainability. We don't have money enough for continue. We have a lot of ideas, but for capacity and for the money, we try to do the best we can do in the moment. So for this reason, sometimes we are very active because we have time to organize very well the time, the tasks, the work. Sometimes we don't put nothing. For this reason, it depends too much. And we know if you want to catch up or engage more people, you need to be very active, and sometimes it is not. But we understand the feminist is not just immediately change, it's little by little. We believe little by little we are building a very good space, and we feel proud of that.
Absolutely. I mean, it really does have that community feel to it. But of course, what you're touching on is this classic problem that's, you know, increasingly an issue even in the digital age as well, where there's this free labor it's come to be expected. But even maintaining blogs and maintaining websites is a labor, and that does pose a real burden. I can sort of hear it when you're talking about it. Is there funding available? Is this one of the problems that you think feminist community spaces really face, that there's no one to turn to for funding?
Is a problem, because in Feminapraxis case, I am the only one. I live on board to Mexico. So if we try to be a charity or offer more institutionalized space, we need to stay together in Mexico, in this case, because it's more easy to make a charity in Mexico than here, because here is so expensive and a lot of issues. And in other hand, we need, you know, the majority of my other college, they are students, they are more younger than me, so they want other kind of jobs. I remember the year before the pandemic, or in the pandemic time, we launched a crowdfunding and we basically filed, because my college make this crowdfunding in Mexico, but the people, some people donate money, but this money don't go to any place, because in Mexico was not working this crowdfunding. So in the idea to change everything in my name in United Kingdom was a messy, and we desist to continue with the crowdfunding. And at the end of the day, the donations return to the people. We need to think if we need to continue with this kind of make crowdfundings or other kind of activities to have money, or just continue with our own donations. For the moment, I think our priority is open the space. No, I hope continue working this year and the next year to continue supporting Feminapraxis.
So I'm hoping to sort of segue to think a little bit about the London feminist scene that you're a really lively part of. Could you tell us a bit about the kinds of feminist communities that you found in London and how you would describe them?
I am very grateful, because when I come from Mexico to London, I was very, very interested to take part in a collective feminist. For this reason, was for me very, very important to find the Feminist Library. I remember one night I went to my capoeira classes, and I walking from Elephant and Castle to Waterloo Station, and I saw we need volunteers. And for me, it was a big surprise to see that the Feminist Library was in London, and for me it was so important to go. When my English was very, very basic, just I say hello, author 2 or 3 works, and that is. And I went to Feminist Library to be a volunteer, and I was very, very welcome. In my interest, like a historian, an activist, an editor, to be access to a different books was for me a very, very important discoverment, because I don't feel this disconnection with my own desires, and for this reason I will try to involve more in author works inside to the Feminist Library. And for 2 or 3 years I was part to the archive teams and then an activity teams, and finally I find my place when I meet Eva and Emma, and with them I can speak Spanish, and as well with Ana Pigot. So we try to create the Spanish book club, and for me this was my space, and I is continue my space. And I say yes, because a lot of migrant women from Latin America, queer people from Spain and Latin America, they want a space like this, safe space, but as well feminist, intersectional, a queer space to share the time together. We are running the book club in 3 years, and I have amazing experience. I am very, very grateful to take part in this space.
Yeah, so something like the Feminist Library then, that had that real physical presence in London, like a place you could actually go to, is really, really quite special. Do you think there are certain kinds of feminist communities that are still missing from the London scene? Because you talk about the Spanish book club that you started, and it's not, that there aren't other Spanish book clubs around, but that was something that you felt at the time that you needed, and that has been, a really brilliant source for you. But I wonder if there are other kinds of feminist communities you think maybe we need, or if there are parts of the feminist community that are less well represented.
I think London have people from different places, from different cultures, with different language. For the moment, in Feminist Library, I think the space is more open than when I went for the first time. And I think it's because a lot of new volunteers, they come in, and when they put their ideas, the projects, they are possible. It's one of the things I like in Feminist Library, because this no hierarchical point of view sometimes is amazing, because you can create whatever you want. And I think in London you can find a lot of collective feminist movements, and I am very inspired as well. For example, for Sisters Uncut is one of the most amazing, powerful feminist movements, especially because they are frontline activists, grassroots, and they are talking about the things that white feminist is not talking. For example, they are talking about domestic violence, police brutality, racism, institution of hate. And for me, it's so important, especially the performance and demonstrations. They are very creative, and I feel very engaged with this kind of activism. And the other movement is 1 million women's rights, and they have a demonstration the last weekend. I like this space because the majority of the leaders, they are Black women and women of color. Like they take part in all the movements that years ago. So for me, it's very interesting to see the new generations and the ongoing generations fighting against similar situations that I feel I was oppressed in the past, and I am fighting against in my actual life.
That's something you really get a clear sense of in London, isn't it? It's not just, feminist organisations popping up in the last couple of years. Like, lots of the organisations you get involved with actually have a much longer history before them, and the people getting involved with them have been involved with this for a long time. And that's really nice to feel part of a much larger community that stretches, not just across space, but also across time. And I'm wondering, for those viewers who maybe feel a little unsure of how to find communities, is there any advice you would give them, about how to find out where the activism is happening or what is on offer?
I am living in this country for 6 years, and the majority of my activism is in my community, in the Latin American community, because it's more easy for me because I continue speaking in my own language, but as well because in Mexico I was very involved in international campaigns. So when I come to this country, was for me very important and very interesting support, for example, the campaigns to fighting against the war in Colombia, and as well support my friends from Ecuador, from Argentina, from Brazil. So for me, it's so important to support the Latin American collectives in this country, because if in our countries, the politicians and people with power don't listen us, I think in countries like this, if we are together, our voices, they are more stronger. And for this reason, I try to support some demonstrations outside to the embassies. When some call for direct action, when I have the opportunity and the capacity, I will go. We have a lot of movements. And some of these movements, they are feminist, and often they are more mixed spaces.
And I'm hoping now we could move to talk a little bit about feminist literature. It seems really important to you. I mean, you began by talking about Gloria Anzaldúa, and you upload reviews of feminist books to YouTube. You're the leading volunteer for the Spanish Book Club at the Feminist Library. So I'm wondering, what does feminist literature mean to you?
It's very interesting for me because when I went to the university, the majority of the feminist knowledge was very academic.
Yeah.
And I found in this country a lot of feminist literature very easy to read. And the majority of the writers, they have a good background, they have a very nice ideas, but they shape their ideas in a common language, of course, in English.
Yeah.
But the language for me is more accessible than if I go to an academic book and I need to read the footnotes. Yes. So for this reason, to come to this country was a very nice discovering, because finally I had access to read and to be involved in feminist ideas in accessible language. I think my strong skill in English is my reading. So for this reason, I try to buy, and when I go to the public libraries, found different books. And as well, because part of my work in LAWA is to be a community educator. And for this reason, I need every time to update my ideas, my knowledge about the community topics of feminist, because I deliver trainings and workshops, and the majority of these workshops, they are about feminist and feminist ideas. So for this reason, I try all the time to have this exchange between the feminist ideas from Latin American, but as well ideas in this country. But of course, the majority of this exchange is between writers like Angela Davis, Lola Olufemi, Chandra Moltape, and other feminists, like they are intersectionals and women of color, no? And as well in Latin America, the majority of the books and materials that I read, they are from Afro-descendant and indigenous thinkers.
I love this emphasis as well on staying up to date, because of course the ideas, they do change. I suppose, are there any feminist texts that have been particularly influential for you?
Guatemalans, thinkers, Lorena Camdal, Lolita Chavez, they are very, very important for me because they are indigenous Maya Quichés. And they have a lot of knowledge, because they basically make memory about what is happening or what was happening with our ancestors, and what happening with the colonization was coming in the territories we call now Latin American, and what happened with the patriarchy when was before and after the colonization. They explain very well in a holistic way and with this indigenous landscape and ideas, and for me, make me click in my own personal story, but as well in my family's story. So for this reason, Lorena Campbell and Lolita Chavez, they are so important. As well, the Afro-Dominican thinker is Yurdelis Ochoa, Ochi Curiel, of course. They they are Afro-Dominicans and they are lesbian. And for me, it's so important because they are decolonials and anti-racist feminists. So, and they have now a lot of impact around through all Latin American to thinking about the intersectionality, but from the Latin American, I read their works, is so important when they talk about the gender and when they talk about the gender dissidence and sexual orientations. Guatemalans and Dominicans thinkers, they are so important for me. In Mexico, we have a lot of movements, but the majority of the movements, they are leaders for middle and upper class feminists. And for this reason, I feel a little not very close to them, but I support struggles like the right to choice, about the abortion, about the sexual and reproductive rights, and as well all campaigns against feminicides, because in Mexico we have a lot feminicides. As well, I support the migrant movements, especially because we have a lot of Haitian communities in the borderlands between Mexico and the United States. And sometimes the people believe that in Mexico or Latin America, we don't have a Black populations or that we are not racist. But actually the migration situation or the migration emergency around the borderlands tell us that everything is happening around the world with this hostility against migrant people and people of color, especially against Black people.
Are these the ones that form the basis for your YouTube book reviews? How do you choose the books that get reviewed?
When I read something and I may lines, I say, wow, I think in my friends, and I think in some collectives, and I think in some meetings and chats I had with other people when I was in Mexico or when I went in United States. And in this moment, we don't have the answers. But when I come here and when I read the books and I say, oh, I think we have the answer here, or we have this idea that in other moment we don't have the capacity to reflect about that. And now we have this answer, no? So this is one of the things, and especially because I want to share information with people. I think this is as well very spontaneous for me.
So do you find the books you review are not necessarily ones you disagree with or would critique, but are actually ones that you think this has something that, you know, I want to share with other people in?
Like I told you, in this country, I have a lot of variety of authors. In Mexico, the majority of the editorial world is dominated for males. And when the writers, they are women, the majority of them, they are middle or upper class. And when I have the opportunity to read these books, the stories they told, they are not part of my own experience. And I don't want to continue supporting this kind of life because my life is totally different. And in the same time, when I share my experience with other women and other queer people, we agree we have other oppressions and other privilege. And for this reason, when I read as well fiction, poetry, that call me directly in my hair, in my own experience. I say, I want to share that. And the majority of these writers, they are people of color.
Are there any books or feminist writers who you've read recently or semi-recently who you particularly enjoyed and would want to recommend?
I forgot to come with this book. It is See Like a Feminist. The author is an Indian author. She is talking about the importance to understand what the power and patriarchy, they are very connected to oppress the genders. And she, like bell hooks and other feminists, basically talk about the feminist is for everyone. No, in this moment, I am trying to find some resources to create a new project for my work. When we can have an approach with the new generations, especially with men, to erupt the rape culture and don't continue normalizing the violence against women and girls, and as well don't continue supporting any kind of violence. And I think we have the responsibility to educate, join, or share our experience like a feminist and also our wisdom like a feminist with the next generation, especially with little ones, men and young teenage men. No, this is as well my preoccupation like a mother, because I have a teenage, my son, and definitely I can recognize this world sometimes exclude other kind of masculinities. If these masculinities is not the hegemonic masculinity, and I think the men of colors, black men, they are suffering, or they sometimes feel alone and isolated because this world is not made for them. And for me, this is one of my worries for my children, because they are men of color, teenage of colors, and I want to create a spaces for them and encourage them to change the life for a better present, a better future. No?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you. And I noticed there you mentioned something about upcoming projects. And I'm wondering, can you tell us anything about any of your upcoming projects?
Every day I have a new project. So I am very creative, and sometimes it's very stressful because one day I say, oh, I want to write my storybooks. For the moment, it's stopping. I put in pause because my computer was stalled since the last year, so I don't have money to buy a new computer. And for this reason, I try to continue, but in other moment. At the same time, I am writing a personal memory for just honoring my way to migrant women in this country for 5 years. When I come to this country, I begin writing a diary. So I have many books or notebooks, and now I think it's time to edit them and try to create a book about that. One of my wish to live in this country, because now I have my indefinite leave to remain. And before was so difficult for me to imagine my life in this country because the insecurity to be a migrant woman, to have a spouse visa, don't give me the opportunity to dream again with the academic life. So now I have my indefinite leave to remain, and I am waiting just for the next step to have the British citizen, and then improve a little more my English in the academic way, and so back to the university to make a PhD in history or something like this. No, and for the moment I continue working in LAWA, and this year we try to create a new project, just very focused, and because in LAWA is Latin American Women's Aid, is specialized in domestic violence. And in this year, we try to launch a new program when we create some series on some trainings or workshops just for educate ourselves like a Latin American migrant women and queer people against domestic violence and gender-based on violence. And so for this reason, I try to to create something different that before was a change maker program, and this was a very, very specific program just for empower migrant women from Latin American background. And of course, in the Feminist Library with the Spanish Book Club, we have a lot of events and projects, but the majority of them, they are ongoing. And so we try to make some proposals and just try to make them possible when the time is coming. We are working in press, working in, what you say in English? I don't know. The point is that we are working on them. Okay?
Yeah, there's so many. You've got so many projects going on.
Yes. This is the point, no? Sometimes we need to be a dreamers, because if you one day don't feel that you have more dreams, and everything is basically lost, no? So I think, like a migrant women, we need to work a lot, but at the same time continue dreaming. And in my case, like a mother, like a worker, like a, I need to understand and embrace all these parts of my life and try to connect them with my personal life and my own dreams. And in the same time, sometimes I think, oh, I don't know if I will have the time to finish everything, but I try to do my best.
That's a lovely note to end on. Those projects, those sort of unfinished projects, they are sort of the dreams in process, right? That you're sort of working towards. Is there anything else you'd like to leave for our audiences? Is there anything else you'd like to leave as a message before we stop?
I tell the people that thanks so much for taking time to listen this interview, for have a fun with us, and as well encourage the people to join to Feminist Library, because when I meet Feminist Library for the first time was in campaigning against the gentrification. And it's very, very sad that the majority of grassroots and collaborative spaces, they are fighting for money, for space, and it's not fair. So sometimes if you have resources in economic way or with your own presence, your ideas, please share this. Everything will be welcome in Feminist Library, and Feminist Library have amazing resources, amazing people, and definitely I think Feminist Library is part of the local and global history for women, especially in the feminist movement. So definitely if you go to Feminist Library, you will be very welcome and you will be very happy. And I want to invite the audience to support more women of color space, because as well we are fighting for recognition, for visibilization, because we are so tired to fight in the shadows, no? We need to be more listen. Sometimes I understand the British people, when they speak just only English, sometimes they don't feel very engaged to listen other people with other accents, with other English, but sometimes you need to be or try to make an effort to listen us. We need to exchange information. And this city, this country is part as well of our legacy, because when you come to this country, in my case, and the majority of the cases of other women, I know their stories, we come for work, for family reasons, but the majority of us, we pay all bills or taxes. So, and we have the right as well to be considered or be recognized like as citizens. We are just not coming to work and work and work and work. So we want to enjoy this city as well and enjoy everything here and make possible other change. So for this reason is very, very important for me, this platform. And thank you so much, Sarah, for giving me the opportunity and the time to chat with me. And I feel very, very happy. And I hope the most powerful weapon we have is the solidarity.
Yeah, Thank you so much, Jael, for taking the time to share your important work with us. I really look forward to following your career and see what you get up to next.
Okay.
And thank you to everyone out there listening. We hope you enjoyed this conversation. And if you'd like to learn more about the Feminist Library, please visit our website at feministlibrary.co.uk. We've got a lot of great events coming up for you this year. And if you'd like, you can sign up to volunteer if you're interested.
Thank you.